You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. And I'm your host, Steve Adams of Mighty Blue. Each week we meet somebody who's connected to a trail. It may be the Appalachian Trail or another of the long-distance trails, but it's always somebody with their own story about their trail. Few people are so connected to trails as the trail maintainer, and I've rarely given them the spotlight that they undoubtedly deserve. I started communicating with today's guest about 6 years ago. Kevin Kinne and his wife have section hiked some of the AT, but they soon knew they wanted to volunteer for the trail. Their journey has enriched their lives, meeting people with whom they struck up firm friendships, one of which ended in a JMT thru-hike with some friends of the show. Kevin will be on in a moment with his story. Also today we catch up with just two of our Mighty Blue class of 2023, but we have 3 interviews. You'll find out why after Kevin. Finally, we're into New Hampshire with George Stephanos. You know, he's such a good writer that I can see the things he's talking about, mentioning Glencliff in today's show. That little place will always mean moose luck to me. First up, here's Kevin Kinne. Today's guest is somebody who actually first wrote to me, because I checked it this morning, in 2017. He's a trail maintainer, and I made a kind of mental note to invite him on the show, but as these things go, I forgot. Anyway, we've communicated a few times now, and not only is he a trail maintainer, an AT section hiker, but he's also done the John Muir Trail with some people that we know. This is Kevin Kinne. Hey, Kevin, good to meet you at last.
Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Long time no meet. Yeah. As I say, you're a trail maintainer. Tell us what your section of the trail is, and your wife's actually, because she does it as well. Because I know that maintainers get really proud of their own areas, don't they?
Yeah, we have my wife and I have a section of the trail in Massachusetts that runs from the Housatonic River up to, it's about 3 miles plus part of the trail that goes up over June Mountain.
Right. And is that something did you choose where it was going to be, or is it near to you, in other words?
It is near to us. We live in Great Barrington, and I reached out actually after I started listening to your podcast. I got really interested in trying to volunteer for the Appalachian Trail, and my wife did too. We had started doing some section hiking, and we heard your podcast, and so we reached out at the end of 2017 to volunteer for actually anything. We didn't know we would become trail maintainers. We just offered to volunteer, and they reached out to us and said, we do have an opening, and they had this particular opening on the trail. So we were assigned it.
It was meant to be then, obviously.
It was.
In that case, I apologise if my show has anything to do with you taking on more work. So I know you're a busy guy, but why did you want to do it? What did you see that you felt the need you wanted to give back to?
Well, we really took advantage of having the Appalachian Trail in our backyard. We hiked it regularly, just for exercise. We ran on it. My wife and I are both runners, and we've run in marathons, and we love trail running. So we felt like the Appalachian Trail had given so much to us that we wanted to give back. We also, as you mentioned at the beginning, we have done section hiking. We completed the Connecticut and Massachusetts sections, and we had seen some trail maintainers on the trail while we were hiking, and thought it would be a good opportunity to give back to the trail.
So do you do that as a solo venture, the two of you, or do you enlist friends or other volunteers to come and help you do certain things? Because I presume some of the stuff you do needs to be done, some of the stuff is probably quite large, isn't it?
Right. So we generally, my wife and I do it ourselves. We have a routine that we do where we park our 2 cars on both ends of our trail section, and we'll start in one and then hike down to our other car and then loop back around to pick it up. Truth be told, we usually hike downhill rather than uphill,
which is the right way to do it, of course.
Yeah. So it's been great, but we actually have enlisted our children to help us. They're all in their 20s. And
Define enlisted.
No, they love the trail. From the time that they were young, we would hike on the Appalachian Trail with them in the Sheffield section up by Race Mountain.
Yeah.
And so they've been exposed to hiking since they were little. And now that they're adults, they've been really helpful. So they don't all live in the area anymore, but when they come home, we go out on the trail and do some maintaining together.
That's kind of nice, to actually maintain the trail. So, and I know that people get very, not proprietorial, maybe that is the word actually, perhaps it is proprietorial. Is it important to you that your section of the trail is as good as you can make it, or is this just part of your job?
Yeah, we do take pride in the section that we have, and we're fortunate because our section isn't really remote. I mean, it starts at a road and ends at a road. Some sections are very remote,
sure.
And we recognize the challenges that other maintainers, at least in Massachusetts that we know, the challenges that they face, because a lot of times they may have to hike in a couple of miles just to get to the trail from where they park their car.
Sure. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah. So what is the process of actually getting your own section? Because you said you just wanted to volunteer and they offered you a section. But if someone's listening to this now thinking, that sounds great, I'd love to have my own section on the trail to look after, what would they do? How would they go about it?
I think every trail maintenance club is different. I don't know for sure what people would do in other parts of the trail, but in Massachusetts, we have a group. It's called the AMC Western Massachusetts chapter, and they have a Massachusetts Trail Management Committee. And we reached out to them and said that we were interested in volunteering. They got back to us very quickly and said that they had a section that was available, and that's how it worked. I assume that it's the same for other sections. I believe there's at least 30, maybe 31 trail maintaining clubs throughout the whole Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. Ours is just the Massachusetts section, which is, we maintain the Berkshire County section, which is the trail runs from throughout Berkshire County in Massachusetts from Connecticut to Vermont.
So, they gave you a piece of trail and they said, right, away you go. But what do? Do they train you for it? How do you actually get started? You can't just suddenly turn up and think, all right, we're going to look after this.
Yeah, it was really interesting. They connected us with a man by the name of Dave Kerber, who has since passed away. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'd really love to go out on your section of the trail and teach you what we look for from when we maintain the trail. He provided us with an AT field book for trail maintainers, which is just a little pocket-sized book that has all the information you need about trail maintaining. And he walked the trail with us, and it was a great opportunity to pick his brain and learn about trail maintaining from him. So that was really how we learned, and we've just picked it up from there.
And did he spot things that you would never spot? I mean, for me, all I see is my bloody feet when I'm hiking, so I have no idea what's going on. So do you when you're actually hiking now, did it change your perspective of how you hike? Because you're probably looking and thinking, what about this? And what about this? I should cut this back. I should cut that back.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I never really paid attention to what was above me when I was hiking. And Dave taught us that, we needed to look for areas where there were hazardous trees, especially in locations where, like where there were shelters or people would congregate. So I never had really looked up other than to look for mountain views and things.
Sure.
So that was something different. Also, they have very clear instructions about how wide and how tall the corridor should be.
Right.
And, I never really paid attention to that either. But now I look for it. So when I'm hiking other sections of the Appalachian Trail, I'm paying attention to how wide it is.
I bet you're hypercritical of other sections, aren't you?
No, I'm so respectful.
Come on,
of other
admit it.
I'm really respectful of other maintainers. I know it can be difficult.
And And the section hiking you've done, we're going to come back in a minute to the later to the trail maintaining, but the section hiking you've done, how many miles do you have on the trail so far?
We've never really added it up. I know that we've done sections in Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Vermont, and New Hampshire. Sorry, but I've never really added up the miles. In Connecticut and Massachusetts, we decided to do it we went northbound, and we tried to go from one boundary of the state to the Vermont boundary. Sure. And we did that straight up. But the rest of them we've kind of done as we go along. We might be on our daughter played college lacrosse in Pennsylvania. And so we would go down there to watch her games on weekends, and we just hop on some section of the Pennsylvania part of the trail. So
cool. Beware of that.
The rocks were real. I've been hearing you talk about all the rocks in Pennsylvania for years, and now we know.
I was not lying, was I?
No, you weren't.
And I know that a thru hike, actually you threw this away, you just threw this out the other day, and I just noted it down. A thru hike is still very much in your plan. And firstly, would your wife be going with you? And secondly, is there a timeline when you think you might get your thru hikes sorted out?
Yeah, so we're in our 50s. We, our youngest just graduated from college of our four, and we knew that it wasn't possible to thru hike while our children were still in school.
On the payroll, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So, I've always wanted to do it, and my wife has been great about doing section hiking. I'm not sure if we would be able to manage a thru hike. It's definitely an undertaking, and I have so much respect for you having done it multiple times, and for others, it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and you really have to plan for it. So I dream of thru hiking the Appalachian Trail. Whether I actually do it or not, I'm not sure.
Oh, don't do that, man. That's terrible. That is awful to dream about it and not bloody do it. You know, you want to really, you want to move that forward in your plans.
Now, well, I like the encouragement. I really, it would be a dream. So.
And I know that you're very much into, and in fact, really enthusiastic about the trail community itself. And that came across very much when we spoke the other day. So tell us about meeting the Suttons with young Harvey.
So a couple of years ago, the Sutton family was hiking the Appalachian Trail, and their son Harvey, who I think was 4 at the time, they came through our section in Great Barrington. We offered them the opportunity to stay at our house, or actually, I think it began, Steve. I just simply picked them up at a trailhead, and I brought them to a hotel.
Right.
And what was interesting was I gave them some trail magic, which my wife and I regularly do when we're near the trail. And they were really appreciative. I drove them to a hotel, and it was nice to meet them, but I thought that might be it. And then the next day I took them out to the trail, and it was a bad thunderstorm. And my wife looked at me and she said, "Oh my gosh, Kevin, we can't let that young child be out in a thunderstorm on the Appalachian Trail. You got to pick them up and bring them back to our house and stay overnight." And so we did. And they had their trail family. There were, I think, 2 other hikers with them at the time. They were wonderful people. And they asked if all 5 of them could come to our house. And we said, absolutely. So we had renovated our basement, and they came down. It was air conditioned, and they all stayed in our basement, and we had a great dinner, and we got to know them. And nice. It was a fun time. So it was a pleasure to meet them. They became sort of trail celebrities that year from their YouTube channel. And so we were glad that we played a little part in their experience.
And, you know, the support that hikers get from people like you and your wife is so much part of the fabric of the trail that connects us all. And I know we all hear about that. It's the people. From your perspective, how do you explain that kindness? Not necessarily from you, but throughout the community, because it isn't always apparent in everyday life, is it?
Yeah, it's interesting. From our perspective, part of that comes from wanting to have a connection with the trail and wanting to have a connection with people who are hiking the trail. And we know from our own hiking experience that it can be difficult to get a ride. It can be difficult to get food. You're not always going right through a town. And so if we see an opportunity to help someone, it makes us feel like we're part of their journey.
Yeah, that's you though. You know, there is something, and I was talking to someone the other day. I don't even know whether it was a conversation I had face to face or whether it was another interview. I'm not sure, but I said that I think people on the trail tend to bring out the best version in themselves, and I wonder whether that is part of it. You know, you're meeting other people who tend to be showing themselves at their best, don't they?
I do think you're right, and I also think it's a common bond about loving the outdoors and loving hiking, and I think you look at someone who's going through that experience and you see a little bit of yourself in them.
Yeah. So tell us about the JMT, because as you doubtless know, I've bombed out on the JMT 3 bloody times. Why did you choose that as your first thru hike? Because that's what it is. That's a 220-mile thru hike.
I've always been blown away by the West, the mountains in the West. And
had you been out there hiking before?
Yes, both of my sons played summer college baseball in Oregon, and so I had gone out to hike in Oregon, and while they were out there, and I loved it. And then I went when they played in Oregon. One of their games was in California near Yosemite, and so a friend of mine from high school and I went out to Yosemite and hiked there. And I saw the John Muir Trail sign when I was out at Yosemite, and I didn't really know too much about the trail. And I started researching it, and I looked at how beautiful it was and that it was in a manageable distance in terms of number of miles, that it could be accomplished in about 3 weeks, which seemed perfect. So from that moment on, I think that was in 2017 also, from that moment on, I knew that I wanted to hike the JMT.
So how did you prepare for those higher elevations? Because you say you're a runner, and that's a fitness that gives you probably had the physicality to do the hike in terms of what it's like just to walk day after day and the long distance and so on. But how do you prepare for the higher elevations? Was it something that you struggled with, or did you actually work out a plan?
My plan was that I got up before the sunrise every morning, and there's a mountain in our town called Monument Mountain. That's a pretty high. It's not high elevation, but it is a pretty steep climb, and it's manageable to be able to hike up and down it in about an hour. So what I did was I just woke up every morning before sunrise, tried to make it to the summit by the time the sun was coming up, and then I would hike down and I would go to work. So that was my weekday routine. And then on the weekends, you may remember the Mount Everett section of the trail in Massachusetts.
Yeah. It's tough on the downside of that, isn't it?
I went up the side. So I would go southbound on the Mount Everett. It was about it would take me about 4 hours. I do that on the weekend, and I had my full pack. And so I trained by doing that. It wasn't perfect because obviously the John Muir Trail elevation is much higher, but then I acclimated in order to prepare for that elevation. I acclimated by going out to Mammoth Lakes about 4 days before the John Muir Trail.
I did that as well once, one of my failures, but I just couldn't make it work. I think I've since come to the conclusion, I've said it on the show, I think it was more my attitude than the altitude, because there are so few places to get off the trail that I chose the opportunity to get off because I was struggling so much. And had I just been able to carry on doing it, I probably would have got through it. And this made me laugh actually, but I was looking through our emails to each other back to 2017. And you and I actually got on the phone when you asked me advice about hiking the JMT, which when you think about it is a bit like asking, I don't know, Vladimir Putin how to win a war in Ukraine. Did I help?
You actually did. I mean, you did give me advice about acclimating. You told me about your struggles with the altitude. And so I took it seriously. I went in with a much more, with a plan. And you had said to me when we spoke about it, that part of the challenge for you was not being able to get off the trail easily. So I knew that I would have to ship my resupply items. I had sent 3 resupply buckets. And so I just, used that as an opportunity to mentally prepare myself that I was going to be out in the wilderness for 3 weeks. I wasn't going to be crossing highways like you do on the AT.
Mm. And you went, because we mentioned them earlier on, this is why we mentioned really, you went with the Suttons, which was kind of a strange combination, I guess. How did that come about?
Well, I originally applied for permits for 4 permits.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't clear on how the JMT permitting process would work, and I had heard that it was really difficult to get a permit.
Sure.
So when I applied for 4, hoping that my wife would be able to hike with me and also some friends of ours. And it turned out that—
Did your wife know, by the way, you were applying for her?
Yeah, she knew. But I think she, unfortunately, between injuries and some other scheduling conflicts, none of those other 3 were able to go. Right. So it turned out that I had these 3 open permits, and I happened to be watching one of the Suttons post-AT YouTube videos, and they were saying that they had hoped to do a John Muir Trail through hike with their family the year after they did the Appalachian Trail, but they said that they didn't have any luck getting a permit, and they were really sad about it. And I had still had their telephone number from the time they were at our house in Massachusetts during their AT through hike. So I reached out to them and I said, I don't know if this interests you at all, but I have 3 open permits for the JMT in June. If you'd like to join me, you're welcome to. And I had no idea what they think I was crazy or what, but they said, oh my gosh, we'd love to take advantage of that. And so it turned out that they accepted, and we met in California and then hiked the whole JMT together.
It's one thing to give trail magic, and it's another thing to give your home over to people while they're hiking the trail. It's quite another to actually hike with them. How did your relationship with them develop on that hike?
It was interesting. They were very helpful to me because, as you mentioned earlier, I had not done a through hike, and they were obviously experienced with it. And so they provided me with tips as I went along, but also just having that camaraderie, it developed over the course of our time on the JMT. Their son, Harvey, who I think was 5 or 6 at the time we did the John Muir Trail, he's just a wonderful kid. And every morning he would help me take down my tent, and he had a terrific attitude, and his parents were great with him. So I gained a real appreciation as we went along for how they kept him occupied, busy. He's amazing, in great shape. And so as our journey unfolded, I got closer and closer to them and became, I consider them good friends now.
Of course, yeah. It's a fantastic education for a kid as well, isn't it? I mean, for a kid to be out there doing that sort of thing, I think is a terrific thing that his parents are giving him.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just before we started the JMT, there was an article published, I think, in Outside Magazine or something similar, about whether parents were overdoing it by taking their kids on these hikes.
Sure.
And the writer of the article, the person who did the article, said, I felt that it was inappropriate for kids to be on the trail till he met the Suttons. And
Interesting.
That's how kind of I felt, because I recognized how much Josh and Cassie really cared about giving Harvey a great experience, but they also cared about not pushing him too much. So I remember a couple of days on the John Muir Trail. They were always, by the way, way ahead of me on the trail, and they flew, and they would get up early in the morning. I like to get up early in the morning too, but I couldn't compete with them. But when Harvey would get tired, they would take a break. When Harvey needed to do something different, they were really paying close attention to his needs, and so they weren't pushing him too hard, which I really respected.
And this just occurs to me while you were saying that, that hike, a bit like when you take and I'm not comparing Harvey with a dog, but a bit like when you take a dog, because you want the dog to go with you and so on, but it becomes a dog's hike, doesn't it? You have to manage your hike with the dog. They're probably managing their hike in what he can do, I presume, aren't they?
I do think that it had to be. There's certain things that he would be able to do or not be able to do that they would adjust to. So I know that they could have probably done longer miles,
sure,
but they recognized when he had had enough.
and I've just realised that something, a light went off in my head. I made notes when I talked to people before the interviews, and I'd written a note, and all it said was metal straw. I've been racking my brain before we came on there to work out what that was. I've just remembered it was something, you had a metal straw. You didn't know what it was with your tent, didn't you?
Yeah, that was my inexperience at work. When I was trying to pack for the JMT, everyone talks about pack weight, and I was trying to cut down my pack weight as much as I could. And my tent had what you describe as a metal straw, which is just a very short, piece of metal that I had no idea what it was for. And I never had a problem setting up my tent before I left, and I had no idea what the straw was for until I was out on the JMT about halfway through, and I snapped one of the connectors that goes to my for my tent. And I said to Josh, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, why don't you use your little metal straw? And I said, I think I made a mistake. I left it home. He's like, oh, no problem. I've got one for you. And sure enough, he had an extra one, and he gave it to me. And it was almost like a splint for the tent poles, and it worked. And so I used it for the rest of the hike. And if he didn't help me out, I would have been sleeping cowboy camping under the stars.
I bet you're carrying that with you all the time now. So, and I know how it feels like. So how did it feel like to you to be, because this is how I felt about it, standing on Whitney at that moment when you put your foot on the plate, which says you're at 14,506 feet, I think it is. That moment, you are the highest earthbound person in the lower 48. What did that feel like to you? Because to me, it was phenomenal.
It felt phenomenal to me, but I looked around and Josh put Harvey on his shoulders right as soon as we got to the top. And so, you know what, Steve? I wasn't the tallest person.
But at the moment when you put your foot on that thing, you were just go with it. For me, for those seconds, I absolutely were. It's a wonderful
true.
thing.
It was a great experience, and especially after having hiked that whole trail to reach the summit of Whitney, it was the perfect way to end it. As I imagine it must have been for you when you reached Katahdin.
Well, that was, but for Whitney, I know you probably remember. You go up this switchbacks, these 11 long switchbacks, and you get to this thing that says Whitney 1.9 miles. Oh, that's easy. Oh my gosh, the last 1.9 miles are horrendous, aren't they? They're endless.
They were. I think for us, we started in the dark. We started at about 2:30 in the morning.
Wow.
With the intention of getting to Whitney's summit at sunrise. And so what was interesting, Steve, is that as we were climbing up, it was so dark that we couldn't even see what we were doing. It almost made it easier mentally to hike. And then what was very strange for me was by the time we reached the summit and we headed back down, exactly what you said. We saw how difficult that trail was in the light. And I said to myself, oh my gosh, if I had taken a misstep one way or another, I was going down. And in the dark, you don't see it. So
I would recommend anybody who's ever hiked in their life to one day try to get to Whitney. It is the most awe-inspiring experience. And it's not just standing on the top there. It's that whole journey to get there as well and to get down from there. Yeah. And as we both know, there's a considerable difference between the JMT and the AT, the elevation, the path itself, and less rocks. Well, more rocks and roots on the AT that get in your way because the path on the JMT is far, far better graded. Have you decided which type of hiking you prefer?
I like the challenge of being out in the wilderness and just being out there trying to manage yourself. Of course, we had perfect weather while we were on the JMT, literally every day. It got certainly cold, but nothing that was unmanageable. So that part, I like the JMT type of hiking better. But but certainly the AT is amazing, and I think much more social trail probably as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. And I know that you videoed that trip and you have it on a YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the show notes if people want to see the trip, your YouTube trip.
Maybe when they look at it, there'll be the fourth and fifth people that look at my video.
That's okay. There'll be at least 5 and 6 then. and on that YouTube channel, because I haven't actually looked at it yet, I will put it, I'll do it before I put the show notes up. Was it just about the JMT, or is there other things to do with hiking? Does it show any of your trail maintaining?
No, I just started it when I was going to do the JMT. I did like a introductory video, then I did a video about what I did to prepare for the JMT, and then I did a day-by-day video because I thought I had watched other people's day-by-day videos, and I thought I might be able to add something to help people with the experience, especially people who hadn't done it before. So,
sure.
So that's how I did it. And, there weren't too many opportunities while I was on the trail to upload, but I knew my family wanted to have updates. And so I really was doing it for them to let them know where I was and how everything was going.
It's quite a commitment to do, isn't it? Every day, do something every day. It surprises people. I mean, I podcasted my 2019 hike. Oh my gosh. And there were days I thought, oh, please don't, I don't need to do that, but whatever. Now, let's get back to your section of the trail now, Great Barrington. You're a lawyer, and amongst other things, and you told me a very funny story about a call that you received at work while in your lawyering gear. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have our firm, my law firm has an office in Great Barrington among other offices. And one day I got a call from one of the leaders of our section, of the Massachusetts section of the trail. And they indicated that there had been some complaints about some growth on the side of the trail in our section, which you never want to hear, right? You think, we want to always do it perfectly. So my wife and I usually go out on the trail with loppers, and we also have a thing that is like a swing blade, like a sickle type of thing. So I had it in my car when I got the call, and it was at lunchtime. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to go out to the trail and just take care of it because I didn't want it to sit there. So I drove out from my office to the trail, and I still had my my suit and tie on. I didn't have my suit jacket on, but I had my suit pants and dress shirt and tie. And I just figured I'm going to go quickly and knock down some of these weeds, and then everybody will be happy with us. So I went out there, and it was at a part of the trail where it just comes off of Boardman Street in Sheffield, and then it starts to wind its way up June Mountain. And so I started knocking the weeds down, and all of a sudden a thru-hiker came up from behind me, kind of startled me. But then I realized I startled her because she looked at me with my tie on and my suit pants and my dress shoes. Nice. And she was stunned that I was out there. She's like, boy, this is the most well-dressed trail maintaining crew I've seen my entire thru-hike stuff. And she stopped and took a picture and thought it was a unique experience. So that's the only time I've ever trail maintained with my tie on.
I'm sure it should be the last as well. And are you actually given a schedule for maintenance, or do you just do it when you get the chance or as needed? Because you obviously don't want it. You don't want to get behind because we know how stuff grows. Do you go out, make it a practice to go out at a certain time?
We don't have an exact schedule. That no one sets a schedule for you. But
interesting.
But there is sort of broad parameters when in the early part of the season after the winter, they want you to go out and look for blowdowns that are across the trail. If they're small enough that we can remove them, we do. If they're large enough, they have what they call a blowdown blitz, where they have a sawyer who has a chainsaw. We're not authorized to use a chainsaw on the trail. You have to get a certain license to do it. Right. Yeah. So they have, we'll note the location of where the tree fell. The sawyer will go out and remove it. So that's at the beginning of the season. And then as it gets closer to when the thru-hikers arrive, we do another sweep through to clear it and make sure that it's all set for the bubble as it comes through. And then we go a couple times during the through hiking season just to keep up with it. And then in the fall, we go back. So I would say we like to do it, and we treat it as exercise as well. So we probably go out 6 or 7 times a year. A lot of times there's not a lot to do because we've already been out there.
Sure. And once again, I always put my questions together on the day in which I speak to somebody, because I like to have stuff fresh in my mind, especially my mind. And when you do your through hike, let's say you do your through hike, I can't imagine, I would imagine rather, it must be so fantastic to come up upon your section of the trail. Have you thought about that? Because what it's going to be like.
I've thought how wonderful it would be to come to our section of the trail. It's interesting. We had a husband and wife that I hiked the JMT with, just met them on the trail. And I actually summited Mount Whitney with them, and I stayed in contact with them. And they told me that they were hiking the AT through hikers. They're on the trail right now. In fact, they just crossed the border into Maine.
Nice.
So when they got to Massachusetts, they texted me and they stayed at our house. This was just a couple weeks ago. We took them out to dinner. They stayed 2 nights. And what your point about our section of the trail, I was very possessive about my section.
Of course you were.
Yeah. I made sure that I picked them up at my section and I dropped them off at my section. And I asked them, they have a trail family. There's 7 of them. And I grilled them about their views of our section. So definitely we have that sense of connection with our part of the trail.
Well, look, I'd like to thank you for staying in touch with me over the years. Your story has kind of grown since we first started talking, and you're a reflection of the sort of people we need looking at helping look after the trail and being part of that community, which it isn't all about through hikers at all. It's about the people who help them and allow us to do what we want to do, which is through hike the trail. But I'd love you to be that person as well. So don't ever let that dream just kind of wither on the vine. It's something you need to be doing. But I appreciate you coming, and I thank you for all the work you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, Steve. Thank you for what you do.
Okay, buddy. Take it easy, okay?
Take care.
Cheers. Bye. What a nice guy, eh? And about coming up on a trail maintainer, all dressed up for lawyering. Awesome. Kevin sent me some links to trail clubs, as well as a link to his YouTube site where he records his JMT hike with the Suttons. I really love to see him go through his section of trail on a through hike. Don't leave it too long, Kevin. Funnily enough, talking about volunteers leads me neatly onto something I wanted to mention today. As you probably hear from time to time, I tell you that a guest has been suggested by one of our listeners. I sometimes mention the listen, sometimes not. But today I'm asking you to volunteer as a guest on the show. I'm sure many of you have powerful, deep stories to share. You just need a platform to share them, and I'm offering you that. If you think that you'd be a good fit on the show, go for it. I've put a link in the show notes to register as a guest. All you have to do is click on it and you'll be taken to a hidden page on the hikingradionetwork.com website, where you'll be able to share a few details, a picture, and the bare outlines of your story. Make sure you leave contact information, and I promise that you'll soon hear from me. Hope to see you on the show soon. Now, our class of 23. Today we're going to start with Jessica Lang-Wright. Jessica has been hiking with Mighty Mike, who I met in Damascus. Let's hear how they're getting on.
Hello.
Hey Jessica, Steve.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? You're in Roanoke, I understand.
I am in Roanoke.
And from my memory, the trail doesn't go through Roanoke. So what are you doing there?
No, it doesn't. So 2 things have kind of come up. The guy I've been hiking with, Mike, his pack broke a couple of days ago. Like the metal stay, like the Z packs have those metal frames.
That's right.
And it wore right through the bottom pocket that it fits into and was jabbing him in the back.
Oh gosh.
And then before that, we slack packed Dragon's Tooth southbound from Four Pines, and it was kind of a wet-ish day, and he fell, and his knee was already tweaked, and he tweaked it more. And he managed to hike all the way to Daleville after that. But It's just been screaming, and he needed some time off.
Right.
So we came into Roanoke for a couple of nights to try and give his leg the rest it needs. And then we were trying to figure out the whole pack thing and all that too. So
how's he feeling?
A little better. There's a pool here and ice, needless to say. So it's still tender, but a little better.
What happens if you can't continue, Jessica?
People keep asking me that, and all I can say is, you don't know Mike, he's going to continue. But I mean, if he can't, then I guess I'm on my own.
Yeah. Well, you don't want this to end, obviously, whether he goes forward or not. But, it's a decision you have to make because you've been hiking in a certain way and you've hiked as a team. So that it does change the nature of your hike. But, you're pretty confident another couple of days will do it?
I don't know. We just found out that his pack might get delivered to Sanimals today. So he's thinking about renting a car, going over there to get the pack.
Right.
So at least because we have 30-something miles to go until we get to Sanimals via the trail.
Yeah.
And trying to hike with a now frameless pack.
Yeah, that's not good
was not going to do his body any favors.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not. You're right. Yeah.
Because he hiked about 5 miles with it that way, and it was killing him. And I mean, I wouldn't be able to hike with my pack without the frame now either. So.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The one thing the trail makes you do, it makes you think in the moment, and this is the moment you're thinking. So you can't really plan too much ahead until you know where you are. So let's go back to where you were. And one of the first things when you sent me a text the other day was you didn't want to leave Woods Hole. Tell us about being at Woods Hole.
I mean, you just walk into that place and you feel the vibration of it. I don't know how else to describe it.
That's exactly what it is. It's
a whole nother level. Yeah. I mean, and Neville is just amazing. And as a vegetarian, I was so happy to not have to ask about I was just able to eat stuff and not worry about it. And we got in kind of late the first day. So it was right as they were doing the gratitude circle. Yes. And then dinner just happened, and it was oh my God, I don't even have to think about this. So Explain that.
The gratitude circle, I've obviously been through it, and many of us have been through it as well, been in it rather. Tell us what happens.
So basically everybody that's there gets together and circles up kind of on the front lawn. And I love how she said, and I'm probably not getting this exactly right, but she says something along the lines of, the tradition is to say something you're grateful for today, and to say your trail name or your real name and where you're from.
Yeah.
And they take a moment of silence before that starts, which I love too, because as she said to one person who kind of jumped the gun a little bit, she's like, I need a minute, to just gather that thought, right?
Yeah, she normally says, if you feel compelled to break the silence, go ahead.
Yes, that's it. We had one person that just forgot about the silence, though, so she had to put the brakes on a little bit there.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. That's a great place. So you did the Virginia Triple Crown, and you said you slack packed Dragon's Tooth southbound. That's quite. In the rain, that's a tough thing, because imagine get down there in the rain. That's tough enough in the dry. So I think coming down that is one of the first real tests you get on the trail. Did you find it that way?
I honestly, we were super happy that we did it the way we did it, because going up the wet rocks was a lot better than going down the wet rocks.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't think it was all that bad until there's that one spot where it's kind of hard to describe without visuals, but you're basically climbing this very narrow part of this rock face that you have to lean into. And that spot, I was like, what the heck? Am I back in the whites? I thought I wasn't going to have to deal with this kind of thing until I got back to home-ish. So that was pretty sketchy.
And then you said that you went to McAfee Knob, but you didn't get the sunrise you wanted. So you did go up at sunrise, did you?
So we were planning to go up at sunrise. We set our alarms for 3 a.m. When the alarms went off, we actually had cell service there, kind of checked the weather. It was talking about thunderstorms at 4 a.m. So I rolled over, went back to sleep. Mike said 20 minutes later, the skies opened up and it just started pouring. So we didn't even bother. We got up later, cleared up a bit, hiked up there, but it was totally socked in. You could still see the rock outcropping there.
I saw your picture. I saw your picture. Yeah. I saw your picture. Okay. Yes, there's this lone figure with this cloud all over. It was it's kind of forlorn figure waiting for the sun to sort of burst through everything.
Yeah. So we kind of did the pictures and everything, and then we were sitting up there, and like 20 minutes later, it started to lift. The clouds just started to lift, which was super cool to watch for sure. But yeah, not the epic sunrise photo that everybody wants up there. But
I imagine that you had better weather later on, because you said yourself, you kind of agree with me, Tinker Cliffs is amazing. So did you have better weather around there?
Yeah. So by the time we got over to Tinker Cliffs, there was rain off in the distance for sure, but the ceiling had lifted, and the view down that valley from there, or multiple valleys, again, I don't even know how to describe it, like just these multiple ridges that you get in Virginia. And it reminded me, like, I know it probably wasn't the case, but we had a epic sunrise at Chestnut Knob Shelter.
Love it.
Way back.
Love it.
That was like the most amazing thing. Like, I wasn't expecting to see an undercast in Virginia, and we got an undercast in Virginia, and unfortunately the wildfires up in Canada were making for smoky conditions. So we had this, red ball sun kind of coming up and everything. And it was unbelievably beautiful. But like sitting on Tinker Cliffs, I was sort of imagining that I was looking back towards Chestnut Knob, and I'm sure that isn't the case, but it was like, it kind of felt like that.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And the last thing you said, which is a little concerning, is that you're starting to worry about making Katahdin on time. Have you considered going north and then cutting back? And I mean, what are your current thoughts on that?
We've been talking about it a lot. I'll be honest, having climbed Katahdin before myself, that epic finish is what I've always wanted. And to know that that's probably not going to happen is hard. So, I mean, we're still in Southern Virginia, and we've been out here for almost 4 months at this point.
Yeah.
So we're just not making progress fast enough. And now the heat and the humidity, the heat and humidity are my kryptonite for sure. That's part of the reason why I wanted to start early, to hopefully avoid some of that. I knew I wasn't going to avoid all of it, but well, that was circumstances beyond your control with your mother. Obviously, you couldn't do anything about that, and you started later than you would have otherwise liked, didn't you? No, I mean, I started the day I wanted to start, but I figured starting in early March, because I started on my birthday. I wanted to start on my birthday.
Oh, okay.
But I was hoping that kind of early-ish March start would give me enough time to get fairly far ahead so that I wasn't dealing with the worst of it. But that didn't happen. So one of the thoughts I've had is to possibly hike to Harper's Ferry, hopefully be there before like the end of July, and then flip up to somewhere like Massachusetts, Vermont border-ish, go from there to Katahdin, because I feel like this trail was designed to hike northbound.
Totally. I totally agree, as you know.
Yeah. And if you don't do that, then you're not being prepared for the things you're going to run into in that way.
But the good thing is, you know that area, don't you? You hike that area in the past, so you kind of know what it's like up there, don't you?
I mean, I've hiked in the Whites. I've done the first 35 miles of the AT in New Hampshire from Hanover to like the north side of Mount Cube before
Sure.
I left the rest of that. I haven't done the rest of the AT in New Hampshire because I was kind of saving it for if I ever did a thru hike.
Yeah.
So I don't know it directly, but I've hiked in the Whites enough to know what the Whites are like, obviously. So yeah, I kind of know what I'm in for.
Let me say though, listen, I understand why you want that as your spectacular finish, but I think also you want to be able to look back on this as a hike. The thru hike was important to you. I recall you saying, and so if you have to do it in a way that you didn't want to do it, well, that's okay, because if you get it done, then you've still got it, then you've still achieved the thru hike. The fact that you haven't necessarily finished where you wanted to finish, well, we change our plans all the time. You've changed your plans to come into Roanoke now because circumstances made it necessary. So I wouldn't hang up too much on finishing there. It's lovely to finish there, of course it is, but it's not the end of the world if you finish somewhere else. It really isn't, as long as you get it done, as long as you're happy with what you've achieved when you've achieved it.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time letting go of that.
Yeah, that didn't help at all, did it? I can tell.
I mean, you're not saying anything I haven't thought of, certainly, but yeah, I'm trying to get myself to that conclusion. I just haven't obviously quite gotten there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I understand, and really, frankly, you've got to work out where Mike is in this, and then you make your own plans one way or the other, whether it's with him or without him. But you've got to work that out in the next few days. But all I can say is, just always think on it and make sure it's the decision that's right for you. And you'll get what you deserve if you make the decision that's right for you. So I appreciate you being on the show, and I know it's horrible when things don't go as you want them to. It happened to me several times on the trail, and I did things I didn't want to do as well. But you're actually managing your hike in the best way you can, so that's all you can really ask, isn't it?
Yep, exactly.
All right then, Jessica. Well, look, hopefully we'll speak again soon, and wish Mike well. And we'll speak again soon, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.
She's facing a few doubts, but with all she's faced so far, I hope that she and Mike shake off their doubts and push on in a few days. That thought of not completing the whole thing, Nobo, is troubling her. Yet it isn't any less of a thru hike if you flip up north and finish somewhere else. Whatever she decides, it's already a great achievement, especially with that early adversity. By the way, I wanted to let you all know that I'm going to be Paul Collins' guest on the Hammock Hangers podcast this coming Friday. Well, tomorrow if you're listening the day this show comes out. As you know, I did a 5-day hike back on the AT a few weeks ago now, and I used a hammock. Paul wanted to know how I got on. We had a laugh. I hope you listen. Now, Dale Shotkoski. I met Dale in Damascus and was immediately taken by his happy and excited demeanour. When we spoke at the end of last week, he was in Duncannon after a very long day. Here's Dale.
Hi, this is Dale.
Hey, Dale. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm good, and you're. I've got your text.
Yeah.
And you talk about trail magic. Not only our friend Hugh Eckrath, but somebody else as well. So tell us about your trail magic you've had so far.
Okay. Well, the trail magic has been nice. It's always welcome. But Hugh was a wonderful man who's a former guest on your show, I'm pretty sure.
He is.
And supporter. And he treated me to. He really wanted to meet. We visited. We went out to eat together, and he wished me nothing but luck. If I needed anything, call him anytime. And Red Goat is actually a guy from the town I live in Nebraska who did the trail in 2017, and he came back to just meet up with some other people and hike a little bit, but said he wound up doing trail magic because he enjoyed doing that more than hiking right now because he was going to hike up into Duncannon, and he decided trail magic would be better. So, but anyway, he asked where I was because he said he was going to be in Harper's Ferry, and I wasn't quite to Harper's Ferry yet. I was still in the Shenandoah. And he asked where I was, and I told him. And then while I was eating one day in the Shenandoah, I get a text. I turned my phone on, got a text, and it was from him saying, he's at this gap. How far away am I? and I was only 3 miles away. So he hiked out to meet me and hiked with me back in.
Perfect.
To encourage me to keep going and have fun. And he, of course, had something to drink and eat. But all the way from Nebraska, he took his time and drove an extra almost 2 hours just to meet up and spend, 30, 45 minutes with me.
Aren't people amazing when they do that?
It is. And it's such a boost of energy and to your morale and everything when you see people doing that much just to cheer you on, and support you.
And Hugh's been great to, I guess. He's really is quite something. Now, so you don't need cheering up, do you? Because I seem to remember you were pretty cheerful when I last saw you. How's it been going?
Oh, yeah, I'm still enjoying everything. It's more of a grind than it has been because it's kind of repetitive. But the people are still just nice. And where I'm not hiking, I'm hiking in and out of groups with people I've met before. And so by hiking in and out of people, it's like you're meeting fresh people, hearing new stories, getting different perspectives. And just the young people, again, are amazing with their energy. And
exhausting.
And stuff too.
They're exhausting, aren't they?
It's fun. I can't keep up with them, but when I make it into camp and they're there, and some of their stories and their energy is
it's awesome. I quite agree. So you've been in the Shennies. Did you enjoy the Shennies?
I did, and it was some other hiker referred to it as our vacation hike.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way. It feels that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, because there are some stretches that are not as difficult as a lot of the AT normally is, but there are some difficult parts. But there's food, with the waysides and the campground stores, and I got a fair amount of trail magic, and there's so many people on vacation that there's a lot of day hikers and families out there, and more than a couple times I was asked when I would come by, they'd be like, "Are you a thru hiker?" And I'd be like, "Yes." And then with one dad, and it was on Father's Day, and he had, I don't know how old the kids would be, under 12-ish, around there. He had 3 of them, 2 boys and a girl. And he said, "Would you mind talking to my kids?" And I was going to take a break anyway. And I said, "Sure." And they started asking me questions like, "Do you eat the rabbit?" I'm like, "No." "Where do you sleep?" And all that kind of stuff. And their eyes were just big and huge. And I was like, I told somebody else, I said, I felt like I was an exhibit in a museum or something for a while. Like, ooh, there's a real thru hiker.
Wouldn't it be cool though, Dale, for you to encourage, you might have planted a seed in a young man's brain, young kid's brain, and that may come to fruition several years' time and they go on a trail. I think that's a great thing that, any chance you get to talk, by the way, and you trust me on this, by the way, any chance you get to talk about the AT, do it, because you're not going to be able to once you get back home. Because no one's going to know.
I thoroughly enjoyed their enthusiasm. And the dad, I looked at him and I go, "You seem really interested in the trail." He goes, "Yeah, if it wasn't for those 3, I would have been on the trail this year." So there's a guy who really wants to do it too someday. But you're right. If they sense that and they sense a little bit of joy, like I'm having fun, and they sense that too, like, yeah, it's hard, but you make the best out of it. You find some reason to still smile every day. And so it was entertaining to watch their reaction and listen to some of their questions. It was very entertaining.
I'm sure. And to be fair, Dale, you looked like a thru hiker before you started the trail, didn't you? With your beard. I mean, I bet that's getting really wild. How is it still getting long, or have you tried to trim it at all?
It's getting pretty bushy. It was long to start with, and it's pretty much out of control now. So I've tried to trim it a little, but not much. All I have is little scissors, and it's too hard to do.
Yeah. Not worth it.
Nope. I told my wife I would worry about it when I get home.
Yeah. And you mentioned the roller coaster, and people seem to. You say it's something to get through. I kind of enjoyed it. It was an energetic day, no question about it. I kind of enjoyed the roller coaster myself. But you're right, there are hardly any views, are there? You go to the top of a hill and there's nothing really to see, is there?
Yeah, you just climb a pile of rocks and come down a pile of rocks, as you go up and you come down, you go up and you come down. And also we had drizzly days going through there. So, you just have to be a little more careful on the wet rocks than you do normally. And so, but it was just an exercise. It's kind of like, okay, we're going to give you this test. Can you pass this one? And it's like, yep, we made it through that one too.
Oh, yeah.
So what's next? And so that's kind
it's
of
not the most physically challenging you're going to get on this hike. Take my word on that one as well.
I believe you.
Believe you. And Harper's Ferry, did you get your picture taken at the ATC?
Yes.
You did?
Yes. We stopped in there, did our picture thing, and enjoyed. And then we got in late just before they closed in the afternoon time there. But then in the morning, before even the businesses opened, I was at least able to walk through, the Harper's Ferry old areas with the older buildings, read plaques and monuments, and absorb some of the history of that area.
Yeah.
Because I'd never been there before.
No.
So that was very enjoyable. And then as you move out of there into Maryland and stuff, there's a lot of plaques and monuments with history and I was reading about Civil War battles, and I'm reading about all this stuff, and then I'm thinking I probably should move at some point. But I turned it into, again, a little bit of a vacation where it's like I'm going to enjoy this.
Yes, you should do. Yeah, smell the roses, or in your case, read the plaques. I mean, it's one of those things too. And I believe you're in Duncannon now. Is that right?
That's correct.
Wow,
that's correct.
And one of the things you said is all the talk is about what's coming. And you know what?
Yes.
They're right.
Yes. You get a little taste of the rocks coming into Duncannon, and it's a challenge. And I know we're going to have more of that ahead. Some people that I know who are 2 days in front of me said, "Yeah, it's tough, but it's not something you can't handle." They just said, "Get in the right frame of mind, and just start doing it." Yesterday, I did a bigger day for me than normal.
Right.
I did like a 26-mile day. I was going to stop earlier, but some other hikers had come up from behind me and said, "Hey, there's a hiker spaghetti feed in Duncannon tonight."
I'll do it.
That was my motivation.
That was from Boiling Springs, wasn't it? That was from Boiling Springs because Trigger and I did Boiling Springs to Duncannon. That was our only ever 26-mile day. How did you feel after a 26-mile day?
I felt pretty good last night because a lot of that stretch of trail is pretty kind.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
There's some trail there that's really nice. Now I have a train going by me. Sorry.
That's all right. It's okay. I can't hear it.
Okay. And so that did turn into a pretty good day. But this morning when I was getting out of the tent and I had to go to an outfitter here to exchange some socks. We're holding spare socks. So I was going to get some different socks.
Yeah.
But anyway, so when I got out of the tent and was walking, I had kind of a tight hamstring. It's not pulled or injured. It's just tight.
Yeah.
And so I just thought before hitting the rocks, I wasn't going to take a zero. But I thought, let's make sure I'm healthy so I don't tear something tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go ahead and rest. I haven't taken a zero since the last time I visited with you. And I was in Troutdale or something. So, So I did a Nero, but hadn't had a zero in a long time. And I think it's healthy to do that.
Definitely.
To give the body a break.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, that last climb into Duncannon, it's quite rocky and quite tricky in places as well, isn't it? So at the end of a 26-mile day, you've got to be kind of careful when you're walking along, don't you? Right towards the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, it gives you a taste of what's coming, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It only a taste. Trust me, you get a feast. You're going to start to get a feast soon, more than a taste.
I'm going to hit the big buffet table, huh?
And you wrote something that was kind of troubling, actually. You said dogs, I like them generally, but you've been charged at a few times, and you actually fell over. Tell us what happened.
Well, the first time it happened, it was quite some time ago. It was on a narrow part of a trail, and a dog just kind of lunged at me. And the guy had it on a leash, and so that was all. He tried to control the dog, but it just kind of bounced off of me, and I was able to. I don't jump well, but I was at least able to jump and avoided any kind of bite.
Sure.
And then another time, a dog that I'd actually been around hiking with a little bit. It was with some hikers, and they didn't normally leash their dog. And anyway, that group had stopped for a lunch, and I had known the dog already, but I came around a curve, and I don't know, the trekking pole or something else, and the dog just charged, and it was like, aggressive charging, and they were yelling at it, and I knew the dog's name, so I yelled at it, and it stopped, but they were like, holy cow, what's going on? And then the last one was here about 3 days ago, and there were three very nice ladies trying to they said they were at an obedience thing, trying to train a dog.
Sure.
And a hiker in front of me, they had the dog turn to the side and sit. And the hiker in front of me went on by with no incident.
Huh.
And when I came up, the dog decided to make a lunge at me and bounced into my thighs and just knocked me backwards.
Wow.
And luckily, I just landed on my rear on the dirt instead of rock. And I've had shoulder issues in the past. And for the next 2 days, actually today, the best my shoulders have felt from landing so hard, kind of reaching back when I fell over. In my mind, I remembered you having been bit by a dog.
Yes, that's right.
And I was just thinking, this can't end my hike. Please, a dog cannot end my hike, but so far, I think my shoulders are recovering.
Well, funny enough, this is going to come out next Thursday, July the 6th, I think. Well, the week after, our guest is a veterinarian talking about hiking with dogs in a very positive way, actually. So people who do hike with dogs should listen to that because it's going to be interesting. And having been bitten by a dog, they frighten me, and not everybody loves your dog, and people should know that. We don't all love dogs, and it's sad. It's sad to me when people think everybody loves dogs. I'm genuinely scared of them. So
I understand because I had not. I guess when I was very much younger, as a paper boy, I'd been chased by dogs on a bike and stuff, but I was not really afraid of dogs. But I tell you what, I'm very apprehensive now.
Yes.
I will step and give them wide berth.
Yeah.
I do not.
Yeah.
And again, I've hiked with some people who have wonderful dogs, and they're great. I mean, they've been fine. But I'm now, like I said, apprehensive when I come up on a dog I do not know.
Right.
I just don't want that to end my hike. No way.
Well, look, you're going to have an interesting next couple of weeks, so enjoy that, and hopefully, I'm glad you're enjoying the whole thing anyway. And you should still enjoy Pennsylvania because it's beautiful anyway. I love Pennsylvania for a lot of different reasons. It's difficult for the foot placement, with all the rocks and so on, but get through it, but enjoy getting through it because you've got some beautiful spots and some great views as well. So enjoy the rest of your time. Enjoy your day off in Duncannon, and we'll catch up soon. Okay, mate?
All right. Very good. Thank you so much.
Cheers then. Bye.
You guys. Bye.
He's certainly steaming along now, isn't he? Or so I thought. Just 2 days after that interview, Dale texted me again. It wasn't good news. Let's let him tell you about it. Hey, Dale, how are you?
I'm doing okay.
And when we last spoke, you were in, I think it was Duncannon.
That's
and
correct.
Going well, we thought, and something happened. So tell us what happened.
Yes. What happened is my mother-in-law, there's a little more history here. My mother-in-law, just a week before I'd left for the trail, had suffered a fractured hip, and she's in her late 80s.
Right.
And we'd had the discussion at that time whether I should go or not even go on the hike, because that's never a good thing. And the discussion at that time was go, get as far as you can, and if the call needs to be made that things are going worse for her, I would get that call. And that had been in the back of my mind as to whether or not I was ever going to get that call or not. And in Duncannon, I got the call that her health had taken a pretty serious turn for the worse. So it was time to go home, be with my wife and family.
Of course, I understand, and absolutely right. It's absolutely the call to make. Yeah, how are you feeling?
Lost. It's a mixture of, I wasn't planning on getting off the trail, but I knew there was that possibility. I'd resupplied, had new socks, and had every intention of going. But then when I had to leave, there was no choice. I had to go. Family first. I had to just do it.
Yeah.
But being back, being with family and everything has been good. I mean, it's been good to be back and see everybody and do all that. But my mind isn't back yet. My mind is still in the trail mode. It's still there, and so it's mixed. But I have to do what I have to do.
Absolutely, of course you do. And there's there's never any way in which you could turn down, what was going on at home. You can't ignore that stuff. And that's why, some of us who have completed this are so lucky to have completed it. And it's not an easy thing.
Yeah, things all have to fall into place almost perfectly, don't they, to have to make it through, because life continues off trail. And I could have gotten hurt. I have children, grandchildren, you name it, with a big family. Anything can happen. And just in my case, something did happen.
Yeah.
And so pieces had fallen really well for me. I had been really, really fortunate on the trail.
Sure.
I was making my miles. I was feeling good. I was happy. Like I said, my goal was to be happy about something every day, even when it's really hard. Smile about something, find something to smile about. And so like I said, I had a really good hike. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed my adventure out there. It was fun.
So, is there zero opportunity to be going back, do you think?
This year, most likely zero, because with her situation, we don't know how long it will be. Sure. With hospice. You just do not know. Yeah. And so to make plans to go back now, I don't even want to go there. I'll let life here deal with things here, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And getting off, you say you're not quite home yet. Where is your head? Is it still back on the trail a bit?
It's both. I have so many, well, not so many, but I have friends on the trail who were really sad about this. And I'm not normally a real outwardly emotional sort of guy. But there were some people who knew kind of what had been going on, that this was a possibility. And they were around me when the call did come, and they saw that it hurt. I mean, the call to know it was over. I mean, that my hike was essentially basically over. It hit me hard. I mean, it really did. I was more emotional than I thought I would be. Yes. I had invested a lot of work and a lot of mental strength, goes into that hike. And it was emotionally very hard to get off. Even though I knew it was the right thing to do, it was still hard to do.
Yeah, and you know what? I suspect that won't get easier for you for the next few months. I know that when I came back having finished, I felt disconnected from home. Hadn't quite left the trail myself, and I think a lot of people have that feeling they haven't quite left the trail. Do you think one day you'll go back anyway to do a section to finish it, a long arse section to finish it?
I hope to. Again, with my age and health issues, you don't know if that opportunity will present itself. But if it does, I'll try to take advantage of that opportunity. And to show you how fatigued and tired minds and connecting with the world. And on kind of a funnier note, my wife just laughed at me because I got back home late, and it had been a very long day to catch a shuttle, to catch a flight, to get back home and do all that. And my wife picked me up in the airport and got me home. And it was well after midnight. I'd put in close to 20 hours just to getting all that stuff done. And when we walked into the house, she said, I had bought a bag to put my backpacking stuff in. When we got into the house, I said, I need my medicines. I need to go back out to the garage and get my medicine. She said, leave the stinky stuff in the garage. And she says, you have extra in the house. You can just get it. And I said, okay. So I started to get the medicines. And then she goes, where are you going? I said, well, I got to get my sleep clothes. They're in my bag. And she's like, you have a closet full of clothes. And I'm like, oh, yes, I do. I mean, the routine was so ingrained of you take your medicines, you put on your sleep clothes, you do that kind of stuff. And it was like, you have other clothes in the house, so you don't need to go to your bag and get your clothes. And it was like, oh, yes, I do. So like I said, the mind hadn't transitioned home yet.
And it often won't. You're going to think back to the trail and so on. But, you should be happy being back as well. Home is a wonderful place to be, but so is the trail. They're both wonderful places to be. And how long have you been back now? A week?
No, I got back in
4 days.
Saturday night.
A few days,
yeah. Saturday night. Yeah, very late Saturday.
And is there one big takeaway for you from this trip?
Wonderful people that I met, that I hope to remember for a very, very, very long time. The memories of the people are great. The trail itself is so phenomenally difficult and hard in so many ways, but I know you have merchandise, even there's no hill you can't get over, no mountain you can't get over.
Yes.
And if you just keep going. And that had been in my mind so many different times when it was just so difficult some days. Like, how am I going to get over this? So it's like, well, you get over it by keep keep moving. You keep putting one foot in front of the other. And then when you do, it's like, you did it. You have it. You can do this. And so the confidence had been growing. I learned so much. I went in fairly new to a lot of this, and I learned a lot. And we were getting more to the rocks and even some scrambles and different things that caused anxiety to go quite high sometimes. Like, how am I going to get over this? But you find a way,
yes.
And I was finding that kind of mental strength and physical strength to do it. One thing I wish I'd done better, there's always things I can do better, is eat better. I think I lost way too much weight when I got home. That's the comments people were making more and more, is like, you need to eat. You're skinny. But on trail, I didn't feel skinny. I felt strong. I felt like I could do it. So I was okay. But no, the people are incredible, and the trail itself is it's a beast, but it's a fun beast to take on and keep walking on.
Yeah, it's a joy. And is your your beard gone yet?
I just left the barber shop this morning, so I got a trim. It's not gone, and the hair got a big trim, and so the beard less of a trim than the hair. So I'm going to keep the beard for a while, but it's shorter than it was on trail.
Well, your spirits sound higher than I expected them to, so I'm sad about your mother-in-law, obviously, and I'm sure your wife's happy to have you home, your family's happy to have you home, and I really appreciate you being part of this family, the Mighty Blue Class of 23, because you were always a joy to talk to. So I just hope things go well and you one day get the chance to get back on there.
I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the class, and part of me too is feeling like I was letting you down.
Absolutely not.
But I appreciate your total understanding of this. And like you said, life is big, and the trail is I've been lucky to have the trail be part of my life now.
Absolutely.
It's been part of it.
Yeah.
So
and we were pleased to have you on the show. And the fact that you haven't let anybody down. You've done over 1,000 miles, man. I mean, come on.
Yeah. It got real. At some point the hiking really got real.
Yeah.
That trail became part of me. So I appreciated it.
Yeah,
I appreciated the opportunity.
Well, look, stay in touch. Okay? And if you go back next year, let me know.
I sure will.
Okay,
Thanks
buddy.
again.
Cheers then. Bye.
Take care. Good luck to everybody else.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Well, the first thing to say is, of course, family is always going to be the priority. You can't stay out there when you're needed at home. Yet I could feel the tug that the trail was having on him. I think he's come to terms with the fact that his hike is pretty much over this year, yet part of him's still out there. If you've ever doubted the pull that this, or indeed any other long-distance trail, can have on a person, then listening to Dale just now is a good example. I wish him well and hope he gets the chance to still get to Katahdin someday. Before we get on to Then the Hail Came, I wanted to mention again our Woods Hole weekend in September. We still have to finalise details, but I pretty much told you what it was about last week. Several of you wrote to me to be on the list, and I know that Neville at Woods Hole has also heard from another interested person. So if you want to invest in your through or section hike, just email me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com, and you'll be one of the first to know all about it once it's finalised. And the other thing I wanted to say, of course, was a big thank you to our donors, including monthly donors Ann Dobson, Mike DiCello, Jens Lebheider, Brian Hilton Jr., Lisa Rana, and Woody Bass. Thanks to you all. You keep me honest. Finally today, let's hear how George approaches those fabled last two states of New Hampshire and Maine. I'll see you next week. Tuesday the 30th of August, 1983, mile 1705.1. I was at the White River Bridge today at 12:15. The Appalachian Trail followed Vermont 14 north for a half mile, paralleling the river, and turned east on a smaller paved road. After another quarter mile, the road passed under Interstate 89 and the pavement ended. The 80 followed this dirt road up a ridge for 2 miles as it gradually dwindled into a dirt track. The next few miles were on jeep roads, crossing the wooded crest of Griggs Mountain and descending to Happy Hill Cabin, an enclosed trail shelter with doors and windows. It was another great-looking Dartmouth Outing Club shelter. I spent about a half hour there talking with a southbound thru-hiker who had never heard of the Ralph's Peak Hiker's Cabin or the Graymore Monastery. I filled him in, just as others had done from me in the past. After Happy Hill, some of the dirt roads looked passable by ordinary automobile. I enjoyed my last sights of Vermont forests, but the weather was once again threatening. Yesterday there was thunder in the west back towards the Green Mountains for the entire time I was hiking, though I never did get rained upon. Up to this point the rain was yet to appear, but thunder now surrounded me in every direction. The last 2 miles of descent to the Connecticut River were on paved roads, including the final mile on US 5 and Vermont 10A. These were 2 busy roads, and walking them felt a little strange with all that heavy traffic roaring past. I've grown accustomed to the quiet serenity of the forest over these past months. I crossed the river on a beautiful little stone bridge and entered Hanover, New Hampshire, 12 states down and 2 to go. Back in Virginia, the trail sometimes seemed to crawl by. Now it almost moves too fast. The beginning of the Appalachian Trail in New Hampshire followed busy streets through downtown Hanover, home to the Ivy League's Dartmouth College. The sidewalks were thronged with students and their families. No surprise, since I imagine the fall term must be starting about now. I strode through the bustling crowds, among them, yet in a deeper sense, worlds apart. It was a relief to turn off the roads and return to the still forest. The Appalachian Trail from this point to a ridge named Velvet Rocks was like something out of Tennessee. It was constantly scaling up slippery slopes only to immediately drop back down. The sky contributed to the wonderful ambience of this section by opening up and dumping all over me. The downpour turned an already tricky, shifting footway into a treacherous, muddy mess. After about 2 miles of mild torture, the trail improved to the point where I could begin to enjoy myself, despite the rain. The toughest remaining obstacle was the crossing of a 30-foot wide stream which lacked an alternate high-water route. The monsoon through which I was suddenly hiking had quickly transformed this quiet brook into a small whitewater river, and the rocks on which the trail crossed were completely submerged in the rushing current. I was compelled to bushwhack some distance downstream in order to find a feasible crossing. A low strand of barbed wire had been cunningly concealed in the brush along the stream bank. My shin found it. Good thing it wasn't 2 feet higher. I managed to extricate myself and walked away relatively undamaged. I arrived at the Etna-Hanover Centre Road crossing at 7:25, 5 minutes early despite all the obstacles at the end. The final surprise of the day was a brand new relocation which had not been included in my updated 1983 guidebook. It turned the last 1.6 miles of the Appalachian Trail today into 2.4 miles, a 150% increase for my tired, soaked body at the end of the day. The AT is so much fun. Virtually all the Appalachian Trail that I hiked today was pure connecting trail, especially the 9 miles in Vermont. There were frequent road walks and few scenic highlights. My guidebook again informs me that major relocations will soon reroute most of this stretch in order to create a more scenic trail. I would like to hike this trail again when that happens. If what I've seen so far of their work is any indication, the DOC will do an excellent job. Wednesday, the 31st of August 1983, mile 1716.8. It was cloudy and damp and looked like rain at 12:40 this afternoon when I returned to the Appalachian Trail. The AT followed a private driveway for a short distance from the road before turning into a field and skirting the edge of water company property near a reservoir. It entered the woods and climbed over several hills on old roads and paths. There was a major discrepancy between the guidebook and its accompanying map regarding the trail route on Moose Mountain. The book said that a brand new relo ascended to the South Peak and followed the ridge crest over the North Peak with good views. The map showed the Appalachian Trail meandering along the lower slopes of the mountain's west side. As it turned out, the map was correct, trimming about a mile off an already short day. When I discovered this fact, I immediately sat down in the middle of an attractive birch forest, mostly to kill time and eliminate some of the weight from my ride I was facing at the end of the day. The AT passed through an emerging new housing development and another area which was in the process of being lumbered. I believe that the Moose Mountain relocation is going to be a very good one. The stretch of the Appalachian Trail over which I walked today was pure connecting trail. The new route, as it's described in the guidebook, will be worth the trip for its own sake. After swinging around the north flank of Moose, the AT crossed a paved road. A rope was hanging from a tree beneath a cardboard sign which read, "Hikers, if our very friendly lab starts following you, please use this rope to tie her to the tree so that we won't have to hike up the mountain to find her." It sounded like the plea of someone who had been forced to climb that mountain many times. The Appalachian Trail followed some dirt roads through a pleasant farm valley encircled by mountains and re-entered the forest to begin a taxing climb up to Holt's Ledge, the first real mountain which it had thus far traversed in New Hampshire. It kept turning onto one woods road after another, and each was a bit steeper than the preceding one. It passed just to the left of the wooded summit and began very gradually to descend along the ridgeline. The sun broke out just as I was breaking out onto the open ledges. Suddenly, the sky was clearer than it had been in days. I sat down to drink in the sunshine and the views. I was so far ahead of schedule that I was able to linger for about an hour. I had a 180-degree view of miles of lowland lake country to the south and mountains to the east and north. From this relatively low altitude, the masses of Smarts Mountain and Mount Cube shut out my view of the loftier peaks of the White Mountains to the northeast, but they were impressive features in themselves. I'll be climbing them tomorrow. The most mesmerising portion of the view was that wide expanse of green forests and blue lakes stretching out to the southern horizon. It was nice to finally receive some cooperation from the weather, just when it could really pay dividends. I made it down the mountain in no time and arrived at the Lyme-Dorchester Road 20 minutes earlier than planned at 5:40. Just as I reached the road, it began to rain. Soon it was pouring. So much for cooperation. Mother Nature seems to still hate my guts. I spent 50 minutes being soaked until my ride arrived. Just as I stepped into the car, the rain stopped. You too. I have about 1 month remaining in my hike. Tomorrow is the first day of September. Today I passed the 4/5 point of the Appalachian Trail. It looks as if I'm destined to complete it in almost exactly the 5 months on which I had originally planned. The foul weather is supposed to break tomorrow, which will be excellent timing. I'll be traversing Smarts Mountain and Mount Cube, purportedly the two most spectacular features on the Appalachian Trail between the Green Mountains and the Whites. Tomorrow will be my last day of peace before the 3-day Labour weekend, but that will be the final holiday with which I will have to contend on this venture. I will soon be backpacking once again, and the trail shelters should be less crowded as the summer season draws to a close and folks return to work and to school. Thursday, the 1st of September, 1983, mile 1731.2. The first day of September was a gorgeous day in central New Hampshire. It could not have come at a better time. I hiked one of the most spectacular sections of the entire Appalachian Trail. I knew from my reading of the guidebook that it would also be a very strenuous one, including a 2,400-foot and a 1,760-foot climb. In order to cover all that climbing and still have time to enjoy the impressive scenery, I allowed myself 7 hours to traverse this 14-mile section. The hike began at 12:20 with a 2-mile road walk. At the beginning, I passed a few farmhouses, but most of this stretch was in the woods. It was a good warm-up stroll, climbing very gradually. The Appalachian Trail turned onto a woods road and the climb became more strenuous. It followed this woods road and another one up the lower slopes of Smarts Mountain for a couple of miles, following the banks of Grant Brook. The AT left the road and turned up an extremely eroded and rocky trail. It was a steep scramble across slanting, moss-covered rocks over which a steady trickle of water was dripping. I had a difficult time keeping my feet beneath me. I climbed through a spruce forest, eventually breaking out onto open ledges with views westward towards the Connecticut River Valley and the distant blue-grey line of the Green Mountains. After about a mile, the trail turned straight up the rock face and became even steeper and more difficult. Fortunately, this stretch was brief. When I arrived at the junction with the side trail to Smarts Mountain Shelter, I was more than happy to make a short side trip in order to recover from that climb and enjoy the expansive vistas to the south and east from the shelter. I flipped through the register, finding comment after comment about the magnificent view from the fabled Smarts Mountain Privy. I admit that I was becoming concerned about my fellow thru-hikers' sudden fixation on bodily functions, but once again I shrugged my shoulders and sauntered up to check out the outhouse. What can I say? The view from that crapper is so compelling that the DOC has completely removed its walls and ceiling in order to enable the grateful user to enjoy it to the fullest extent possible. Considering the climate in northern New England at this altitude, I found the open-air concept a little, deranged, but I must admit that the views did absolutely blow away those from any other toilet of which I've ever been. The magnificent sweep of that lake country eastward to the foothills of the White Mountains could make a man feel himself to be the lord of all he surveyed and compel him to leave his newspaper unread. It is a heady thought. On the downside, New England weather had not been kind to the wooden seat. Splinters were a distinct hazard. Ouch! Fortunately, I had no need of the facilities. I spent a half hour at the shelter before hiking on another whole 10th mile to the 3,240-foot summit, where I spent another 15 minutes enjoying the vista from the fire tower. The 360-degree panorama was dominated by the nearby hulk of Mount Cube and the distant mass of Mount Moosilauke, my first glimpse of a major White Mountain summit on this hike. The Connecticut River Valley and the lake country were a pastoral dream, drawn in brilliant sunshine beneath a deep blue sky. My mind wandered back to the numerous occasions when I felt compelled to quit this quest during its sometimes dismal early days, and I felt an enormous surge of gratitude towards the tired, heartsick guy who kept trudging onward back then. I took one more look at the alpine summit of Mount Moosilauke before continuing my hike. I'll be climbing it in a couple of days, returning to the White Mountains after a 2-year absence. The trail down the far side of Smarts Mountain was in worse shape than the ascent had been, but what did that matter to a man who was surrounded by that kind of magnificence? The AT lunged downward across more of those dripping mossy rocks. It required more time for me to cover the first mile down from the summit than I had needed to make that final steep mile of ascent. After that first mile, the Appalachian Trail began following a woods road, which gradually became a passable dirt road as I walked past a couple of crude cabins. The road emerged from the woods in a wide, flat, high valley, passing farm fields over which there were spectacular views of Smarts Mountain behind me and of Mount Cube up ahead. The farms were part of a tiny mountain community known as Quinttown. Altogether, there was 4 miles of walking various grades of dirt roads through the valley. The Appalachian Trail route was not well marked, but I didn't lose too much time in finding my way. A proposed relocation for this section of trail will remove this roadwalk. It will improve the AT. Most of the roadwalk was rather dull. Nevertheless, that little stretch near the beginning past those farms made the entire roadwalk for me. I'm glad I was able to see this portion of the Appalachian Trail before the reload was completed. I'll be back someday to see what the new trail looks like. After 4 miles, the AT left the dirt roads and proceeded to climb Mount Cube. Mount Cube shelter was located at the base of the mountain, just a quarter mile from the road. It looked very used, but the area was kept nicely clean. The best feature was another great outhouse, identical to the one I described at Cloudland Shelter in Vermont earlier in this chapter, right down to the bulletin board on the wall. I wrote another rave review of a DOC outhouse on an index card and tacked it up with the others. Then I began the warped, diseased climb up Mount Cube. The trail up Cube was similar to the trail down Smarts, only steeper. The air was dry and cool, but I lost buckets of sweat on that ascent. I was happy to break out onto the open ledges surrounding the South Peak. There were fantastic views, better in fact than the guidebook had described, a nice change of pace from the frequent guidebook hyperboles. The South Peak, the mountain's main summit, had views to the south and west of Smarts Mountain, Holt's Ledge and the Connecticut River Valley. The elevation was just over 2,900 feet. I enjoyed that view for about 15 minutes before making my way over the rugged rocky crest to the North Peak. Ledges near this summit featured great views of the White Mountains towards the northeast and a scenic farming valley encircling a large lake to the east. The climb down the north ridge of the mountain was another scramble. It took me forever to pick my way down the first precipitous mile. Occasional views to the north from along this ridge enlivened the descent. A relocation near the base of the mountain lengthened the trail somewhat, but made the going much easier. Nevertheless, between the slow descent and the extra mileage at the end, I arrived at New Hampshire 25A 15 minutes late at 7:45. It had been a tiring but entertaining day. Tomorrow I will traverse a very easy 14-mile section of trail through which I anticipate breezing. Beyond that lie Mount Moosilauke and the rest of the White Mountains, where I will truly have my work cut out for me. Friday the 2nd September, 1983. Mile 1745.7. I guess that my down-to-the-wire, live-on-the-edge mentality could not handle the concept of an easy day, because I didn't set out on the Appalachian Trail today until 2:15. That left me needing to average 2.5 miles per hour, brakes included, to arrive at the trailhead at 7:45, the current time for nightfall. As my legs were still feeling the effects of yesterday's tough climbs, that was a tall order. The initial mile of trail was a meandering stroll through the forests on assorted trails and logging roads, after which the AT cut across a farm, going through a pasture and past some outbuildings and turning onto a dirt road. The next mile was all on dirt and gravel roads, at one point approaching Upper Baker Pond, a large placid lake dotted with vacation homes and surrounded by an arc of low ridges on 3 sides. I've seen so many of these scenic mountain lakes lately, I'm almost becoming jaded. This was followed by several woods roads as the Appalachian Trail ascended a low wooded ridge. The AT turned onto a dirt road called the Old Cohos Road and followed it for 2 miles past a few cabins, a couple of farms, a great deal of forest and one extremely old cemetery. It was an intriguing walk upon a historic road dating back to 1768, and the forests were pleasant, but today's trail was obviously merely a connecting link between the rocky open ledges of Mount Cube and Smarts Mountain and the alpine crest of Mount Moosilauke. It made for a pleasant enough rest day between 2 difficult and rewarding sections. This entire portion of the AT is marked for relocation. Hopefully they can do something a bit more dramatic with it. The next mile of the Appalachian Trail was on New Hampshire 25C, a paved 2-lane highway. The most interesting feature of this roadwalk was a sign I saw peeking up over the top of a hill as I climbed along the road. I saw the top portion first. It said, "Restaurant." As I neared the top of the hill, the remainder of the sign came into view. "For sale or lease." Many thru-hikers' hearts must have been broken by those last 4 words. After I turned off this road into the woods, the final 7 miles were on footpaths through the White Mountain National Forest. It was a rather uneventful return to the place for me, mostly a long, easy climb over a hill called Mount Mist, a low wooded ridge with one excellent viewpoint along the northern flank of an undeveloped pond in a tiny bowl-shaped wooded valley encircled by small mountains. Over the top of one of those hills, Moosilauke towered in the background. I stopped at this viewpoint for my first and only break of the day. The trail descended past a water source called Hairy Root Spring. I know, sounds yummy, doesn't it? To the shores of that mountain tarn known as Wachiporka Pond. It crossed a marshy area and climbed over a wooded hill before dropping down to New Hampshire 25, another small 2-lane highway just outside the outskirts of a little New Hampshire village known as Glen Cliff. I arrived at the trailhead at 7:30, 15 minutes early, thanks to all my non-stop walking today. Darkness was falling and the evening was becoming rather chilly. I put on my chamois shirt and sat down to await my ride. I brought with me no long pants and my legs rapidly became chilled as the body heat generated by hiking subsided. It was a beautiful night, unbelievably clear. The sky gradually donned the velvety black mantle which city and suburban dwellers so seldom encounter. Constellations began to appear, and the Milky Way spanned the firmament in a blaze of glory. I lay on my back alongside the blacktop, oblivious to the fact that I was freezing my butt off. The entire universe flipped over, and I was staring down into a huge black abyss. The few stars with which I was familiar from southern Connecticut skies blazed like beacons here. My eyes would shift to the empty black beside them, and gradually lesser lights would emerge, eventually flaring with frozen fire, approaching the intensity of their more spectacular cousins. My eyes would shift to another empty portion, and more lights would eventually swim up from the depths. I wish my friend Mark from Shenandoah could have been there tonight. I fell deeper and faster through the vast universe as my forgotten body slowly froze beside a little used mountain road on a tiny pinprick of light far above. Infinity. It was a magnificent sight, and one which I was able to savour for a good long time. My mother took a wrong turn on the way to pick me up and came out somewhere in Vermont. By the time she got straightened out and managed to reach the trailhead, it was 9 o'clock. It was also a strange night. Virtually every one of the few vehicles that drove past while my body waited on the side of that road was a pickup truck. The connecting trail is all behind me now. Tomorrow I begin hiking the Whites. Beyond that range lies the promise and fulfilment of Maine, the unattainable dream. Somewhere beneath these shimmering stars tonight, Katahdin awaits a solitary pilgrim. 392.8 miles to go.